Hi all, and welcome to the next episode of my betting diary. I've decided that I'm going to actually do the episodes on the Monday where possible, just because it allows me to then easily review the week, Monday to Sunday from the previous week. And it's a day where I actually do have free time because a lot of the tennis tournaments don't have many matches until Tuesday. They might just have a few evening ones on the Monday. So unless it's a crazy week like the Australian Open, from now on I'll do these kind of updates on the Monday. I think it'll be a bit more convenient. So yeah, first losing week of the portfolio for the year, and almost all down to my first couple of horrible days at the Australian Open. I figured out earlier that during those Saturday, Sunday bets that I sent, we lost 19 points for those bets that were settled, that were based on the first round, and we had an outright in there as well. But yeah, the betting wasn't good enough for that time. And I got a few comments, some related. So you tend to get two types of feedback in terms of constructive feedback. Some it feels just kind of personal, and then other feedback feels like it's coming from a good place. And I had like different messages in that respect. Some were saying kind of like the volumes probably when you send that kind of volume on a given day, that it might be not your strength, and I completely concur with that. But I also got a message about kind of like accountability, and it was relating to, I don't think you're being kind of completely honest with yourself in regards to the betting results, and if like you don't say when you've made mistakes, you're kind of acting as if it's kind of hunky-dory when it's not. And that really put me on the defensive at first, I can't lie, because I think in terms of how I talk, I try and be, I'd say, very candid with my thoughts. I just try and be as honest as possible with subscribers. Like, obviously there's got to be some kind of saturation in that respect, but also in terms of, you can't just spill your whole in a dialogue. But I'm certainly more honest than most. And I do talk about bets where I feel like I've made mistakes. So I was defensive about that, but I also asked myself, like, does he have a point in a sense? Like, because I think I have, at the start of that week, I had maybe been not almost too optimistic in a sense in how I was summarizing my bets. Like, I was getting closing line value, and I felt like I was a little bit too carefree. I just felt like, I my process was good without making sure it was good. And essentially, I think in those first couple of days before Australian Open, I just didn't rule out bad bets. And that is basically the kind of the crux of what he was saying, is almost like you need to be accountable for every bet. And although, like, I still don't like how that individual worded it and so forth, it also actually struck a good nerve in a sense, that it was like, oh, on those first 2 days, you know what, I didn't actually rule out certain bets. I was looking far too much at the positives behind the bets, and that's never when I'm in a flow state. When I'm tipping well, I'm always ruling out bad bets. I'm like, yesterday, for example, I was close to tipping Runa, but I thought the price range isn't quite right, considering it was outdoors, considering the heat, considering best of five, Rublev's hitting the ball very cleanly through the court, and I ruled that out. And on that first, and of course it could have been, you could have called that unlucky in a sense anyway. Rune had 5 match points, but I don't think it was a great positive EV bet, for example. Whereas I think last weekend I was kind of too gung-ho. I was looking at, oh, Davis has won. For example, the Davis bet against Lynette, I was like, oh, Davis has won the event before, the week before. She's in great form. It's a fast court. Kovanic is going to get rushed. Whereas I didn't consider the downside, which I referred to in hindsight. The negative view was Davis has won a title. She's coming into a new week where she might need time to build up her intensity, and that's exactly what happened. She loses a set 6-1. The bet wasn't a great one when you're betting a minus 3.5 games handicap at 1.82. So yeah, I was punished for those 2 days, and as I said, lost 19 points. But it was just important to realize why that happened and to have accountability to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I feel like I have taken steps to make sure one of the first things that I'm going to think about at the start of each bet I analyze will be kind of looking at it, what could go wrong with the bet, and what do I have any previous biases with a player as well. That's something I'm trying to be a lot more aware of this year, is do I tend to bet this player well, or do I tend to bet this player badly? Because I do think there's a correlation between my results, historical results with certain players that are a lot better than others. So yeah, it's allowed me to kind of frame and reflect on those 2 days a lot more, and I feel very positive. I've made steps to kind of alleviate that moving forward, and I know yesterday wasn't profitable, including the Bet365 ones, but I generally think from the second round onwards, the betting's been really decent to be honest. So yeah, I feel like on a general level, I feel like I'm in a very good place with my betting now. But it's about always kind of making those corrections and ensuring that you're always growing and learning with your betting. I think in terms of, yes, it's more likely to happen in January, for example, to have a week, a couple of days like that, where you've not been betting for 6 weeks, and obviously in the months after the US Open, I was saying my process, my mental sharpness wasn't there. So I'm kind of just trying to get almost like a tennis player working their way into the season. I'm trying to get those tipping and betting feelings back, which is a strange concept to try and explain, but it's kind of, I'm feeling like as if I'm kind of sharpening up my process, and I feel like I've now got a really good foundation to push on, but obviously we'll see what happens. The other tipsters, I think 3 of the other 4 tipsters made a kind of small loss, in Portugal bets made a little bit of profit. So overall, I think we're still at an ROI of 6.7%, which is decent for the portfolio as a whole, and £700 profit. It was funny because I recorded the last one and talked about the £1,000 target, and by the time I'd released the recording, we'd already hit it. So, but obviously with my 2 days, it flew back downwards. So I'm not going to set any targets this week. Let's just hope we sort of establish what I might have said last week, kind of thing. Yeah, so I feel like it's not a bad time to maybe do another few previews for the tennis for those that are interested in the bets tomorrow. Lechka looks in superb form in terms of his. I feel like he's always been a player. Like last season, he was developing his game a lot, but he was not making good decisions and just playing way too many loose points at important times. So he would pick up, in Rotterdam against Tsitsipas last year, he won set 1. He won set 1 against Rublev, I think, on a clay event. Had set points against Casper Ruud. But now it feels like he's gained more consistency since the end of year next gen finals has really kind of given him confidence, and it looks like his game's a lot more solid now, from just a mental perspective, and also from his game itself. He does seem to have a lot more clarity with what he's doing, which makes him dangerous because he's got a great serve. He hits very flat, and that's something with the Australian Open. These balls seem to really kind of fly through nicely off kind of flat ground strokes kind of thing. So yeah, he looks very strong, and Tsitsipas obviously likes these kind of heavy evening conditions, but I didn't think he played that well in sets 3 onwards against Sinner. Once Sinner found rhythm and started hitting a heavier ball, Tsitsipas actually looked quite rattled, and I actually thought Sinner was going to win that 5th set, but Sinner just had one really loose service game, and Tsitsipas then, once he had the break, kind of served it out nicely. But I think if Lechka's actually got a pretty similar style to Sinner, to be honest. Hits very flat, takes the ball early, is aggressive, hopefully can rush Tsitsipas at times. He's serving very well, like Oga Aliassime was struggling to kind of make too many returns, and then he was just outplaying Felix from the ground. So I just think there's like, my initial reaction sometimes says a lot when I look at a price, and I looked at 5 to 1 and I was like, wow, that's pretty big considering how Lechka's playing. Obviously on further reflection, I didn't take the win bet because I think Tsitsipas in evening conditions, just that physicality and that experience element might end up sort of wearing Lechka down if it went longer. But I'd like to think Lechka's still going to be able to hit through these courts. I feel the last couple of days I might have sort of underestimated or made it sound tougher than it is to hit through that court. Zhu was hitting through it nicely, actually, and on reflection. And I feel like Lechka's got real pop on his shot. So if he is able to hit through the court nicely, I think it's going to be a tough match for Tsitsipas in terms of returning, and also the fact that Lechka does have the ability to kind of dictate rallies if he's on form. So if Tsitsipas has the same kind of intensity dip that he did against Sinner, which also seems a bit more likely now he's played 5 sets as well, then Lechka's got a really decent chance. Gone for the set 1 as well as the overs, because Lechka against top players, not at this tournament, he's actually lost set 1 and won from behind in the last 2 rounds, but historically I feel like against Tsitsipas, and as I said, he won a few set 1s against top players last season. As I said, I'd rather, if I'm going for a big price option, I'd rather go for set 1 than the win outcome in this matchup dynamic. So those are the 2 bets for that one. Also have Pegula against Azarenka, Pegula to cover the handicap. I wasn't impressed with Azarenka against Zhu, to be honest. I thought that she sort of counterpunched well and was able to just about show enough rally tolerance to force errors from Zhu. But in terms of point serve pace and in terms of dictating points, she just wasn't there. Like, she was quite passive, and I think that's not going to be good enough against Pegula, because Pegula's got the power advantage, and if she's able to kind of penetrate the court better, she's also solid enough to live with Azarenka's counterpunching. So I just think bigger serves, bigger weapons on the fact of, and if Azarenka's passive, then it could be routine. So I do like minus 3.5 games, to be honest. I would be fairly surprised if Azarenka were to win that one. And then the final bet we have is for the Bet365 members anyways, Khachanov to win either 3-1 or 3-2, both players to win a set, and Khachanov to win. I think Korda's probably the slightly better player if they're both at their peak on this court. I think Khachanov has a slight struggle with rally tolerance on slightly heavier courts. whereas Corda's shown that he can hit for it nicely. But I really wasn't impressed with Corda's deterioration from sets 3 to 5 against Hurkacz. The fifth set in particular was a really pretty average standard. Both weren't serving well. And it just looked like there was some physical fatigue because the serving speeds were down. And I actually remember the head-to-head between these two, Khachanov and Korda, a few years back, where it was an absolute... yeah, words can't describe it really, but they just kept breaking each other at Wimbledon. It was on grass and they couldn't hold serve. There was about 8 breaks in the last set, but neither could. It was either tension or sort of physical struggles, but it was a mess. And I do think Korda, in long physical affairs, which Khachanov is the type of player that can kind of drag a player into it. I don't really think Korda's got that same sense of mental intensity and ability to keep going on in a deep in a 4th, 5th set. And I think there's probably not much in this. And I think if Khachanov can take this long, which like my instinct is it goes 4 or 5, I just think he's going to be the one that's stronger. So yeah, I think 3.0 is a price that I want to take on in that respect as well. So yeah, other things to mention this week is the new features. Like really, obviously I haven't really had much in the way of feedback on them, but if you do have any feedback, then feel free to share. Kind of developed my kind of reference scheme a bit more over the last few days. I think it would be too complicated to actually pay subscribers for referring, so what we'll do is do it in terms of points really. It's probably going to be a case where you would still get a code. If you want a code, for example, you'd message me, say I'm have the potential to refer members for you, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, we'll give you a code. And then if you're someone you referred then signs up to the bot and purchases 10 points, you'd automatically gain a 1 point to your account. And this will be the case for every new person you refer. So potentially, say you referred 10 new members and they all purchased 10 points each at the same time on a really good run for that specific bot, you would then get 10 points yourself, and you wouldn't wouldn't necessarily have to pay for those points at the time. So I think it should be a nice incentive. And obviously it'd be great to keep growing the user base for the bot, because the more exposure I get, the more high quality tipsters I can attract to the platform. So yeah, that's probably the next kind of big new feature I'd say that we're kind of looking to implement. And yeah, just sprucing up the stats section as well. Probably have sort of data for each of for different sort of subsets of markets and performance metrics. For example, how am I performing at different staking levels? What am my ROI at 1 point stakes, 2 point stakes? What's my ROI for ATP and WTA? What's my ROI for different odds ranges? So on and so forth. So and different markets. I think that's the most interesting one, isn't it? How am I performing on the match win, games handicap, etc. So yeah, those are things that are on the horizon. Just for the information of all, like top-notch draws is still betting on the bot, and but I did remove the web page just for the time being, because obviously I was explaining in an earlier diary entry that he's sort of developed a new system for how he's kind of tracking the methodology for selecting bets is based over a longer period of time. So it made sense with a new methodology to reset his Picchio, but it doesn't leave me with much in terms of then being able to advertise results, for example, that are verified. So for the next three months, I'm just going to allow him to build up a sample of bets and once that's in place and we've reviewed how the results are going, I can kind of put up a updated web page for his kind of profile online. So yeah, just to be transparent with everyone there. I because of the tennis last week, I haven't followed all of his bets in the last week, but I will be from this point onwards again. So yeah, I think I've kind of covered everything I want to say. Let's hope for a profitable second week of the Australian Open and a good one for the portfolio generally. So cheers, guys.